Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Hi everybody, I'm Billie Stork and I'm an alcoholic. I was out with my friend looking at a map and I didn't realize, and I was running back. I said, my God, they're going to introduce me and I'm not going to be there, and that's never happened to me before. I usually talk about feelings when I start my talks, because when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, I didn't know about feelings. If you asked me how I felt, I'd tell you about my headache and my toe ache and my back ache, and I had no idea about feelings. Most of my life, what I did is I just pulled a shade right down on my feelings and numbed right out, especially on powerful feelings. And I did that to survive my childhood. But what I found out is feelings that come from everywhere, feelings that come from nowhere, feelings, I don't know what they are, and I don't know how to cope with them. But what I do know is life is feelings. And as long as I pull the shade down on those feelings, I miss out on my life. And the headaches and the toe aches, feelings are energy. And as long as I block those powerful feelings, they do go into headaches and back aches and toe aches and all of those kinds of things. For much of my life, they said about me, she just doesn't act right. And how can you act right when you can't identify feelings? And what I do today with my recovery is try to put adequate behavior with those feelings and emotions. What I try to do is talk about my feelings in the now, and that's always difficult for me. It's always very hard for me to talk about the now. So what I do is I made a commitment to myself to talk about feelings in the now. And tonight I had dinner with a friend that I haven't seen, and he was actually my husband's best friend, and I haven't seen him for 7 years, and a lot of nostalgia and a lot of feelings and emotions came up. And feelings, thank you very much. Feelings give me inside information, who I am and what I am. When I came here, I had no idea who I was, where I was going. I really didn't even have very many opinions, because you don't have very many opinions about anything if you're not in touch with your feelings. They give me inside information, and I can't heal anything that I can't feel. And as long as I pull the shade down on my feelings, I don't have any choices on how I want to act. What I am is just one big fat reaction. And so what I did is I started trying to identify those feelings, and the first place I did that is in participation meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous, where I could hear your feelings. Sometimes I would sit there in a meeting listening to your pain, joy feelings and say, yeah, that's a feeling of shame, that's a feeling of guilt, that's a feeling of resentment. I just had to put a name on those feelings. I have done medical sales for a long time, and I would sometimes have to stop the car and say, how do you feel, Billie? So I could get those feelings from down here up to here, so I could get some kind of choice on how I want to act in my life. And I didn't have to be just one big fat reaction. I learned a lot of things about feelings. When I grew up, I was told you're not supposed to feel this way, and oh, don't feel like that, and especially don't be angry. And what did I do with that anger that my alcoholic father just poured and raged down on me? Well, I stuffed that anger all down in here, and that anger became rage. And it came out in my alcoholism and my smoking and all of my crazy, crazy kinds of behavior that I had to do. And today I know that if I can put a name on that feeling, if I can identify that anger, then I can call my sponsor. I can drive down the freeway and scream with the windows rolled up. A friend told me the other day that he was a tennis player, and he told me he drew faces on the tennis balls, and then he hit the tennis balls. Isn't that great? I love that one. I really like that one. Whenever my higher power wants to get my complete and undivided attention, he gives me relationship problems, money problems, and health problems. And I have big time had all of those things in the last year and a half. A relationship broke up. I've had a lot of relationships in my life, but this one was it. And he broke my heart, and I was totally obsessed. And my husband had done a tax credit thing in 1979. That tax credit thing for $30,000 went into $89,000. My husband had died, and the IRS said I owed it to them. Last year I gave them $45,000 and settled with them. A lot of it came out of my retirement, my 401k. And the other thing that happened is I got ill, and I got a disease called chronic fatigue immune dysfunction syndrome, and I have been just devastated and have not worked for 18 months. What happened is, in the years that I've been sober, which is 15, I've sponsored a lot of women. And whenever they would come to me and they would talk to me about depression or not wanting to live or suicide, I would tell them, well, I don't understand anything about that. And you'll have to go and talk to Mary or Joan or somebody else, because I have no understanding about that. And what I know today, it's like this big, black, dark hole sitting over here. And I would go right up to the edge of the hole, looking over that hole, and avoid going down into that hole. Avoid it with alcohol, drugs, sex, men, cigarettes, AA, religion, workaholism, anything that I could do to keep myself real busy so I would not have to look at Billie. In the midst of all of this stuff, what happened to me is I didn't have any more of those things left, and I was sick. And I went down into that black, dark hole, and it was dark, and it was black, and it was helpless, and it was hopeless, and time stood still, and I couldn't function, and I didn't know if I was ever going to come out. I'm really grateful that I had the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous, which taught me to sit in the moment, to trust this higher power that I had come to find here in Alcoholics Anonymous, and to know that this too shall pass, and that there was going to be a light at the end of the tunnel if I could just sit there and hold on. And surely there has been a light at the end of that tunnel, and what's happened to me is I've come out of that darkness into a new place, into a new place with my higher power, and into a new surrender place of my life. Also in the middle of all of that, my friend Barry that I got sober with, for whatever reason, I don't know, Barry kept a lot of secrets. I guess he didn't have somebody that told him you're only as sick as your secrets. And Barry was not in touch with his feelings. He went to a Sunday night meeting in the middle of all of this stuff, came home and sat on the edge of the bed and took out a gun, stuck it in his mouth, and pulled the trigger. And I was in just such a rage. I walked by that casket and I was saying, why, to my friend, why would you do such a dumb thing? And my buddy Jim was standing next to me and he said, Billie, you don't have a right to judge another person's journey. And I went home, and in my aloneness, you see, all of my life I always had a man or kids. Especially, I always had a man. And this is the first time in my life that I'm living alone. And in my aloneness, I remembered my last drink. My husband, when I married him, had not had a drink for 8 years. He took Antabuse. He didn't come to Alcoholics Anonymous. And one night I came home from a sales meeting, and he met me at the door with a Manhattan, and man, I was in my glory. I mean, my dad was an alcoholic, and when I was a little kid, when he was drinking, I was his little darling, and when he was sober, I was his billy goat. And so I wanted to have this drinking partner. This guy was a soft-spoken, sweet little pediatrician, and within 2 weeks, he was a raging maniac. And we took him down to the care unit and put him in the care unit. And the first Saturday night, I went to the care unit and I got a whole bunch of guys. And I took them to this big speaker meeting, took them back to the hospital, went home, looked up in the liquor cabinet, and I said, now he is an alcoholic. And we're going to have to throw all this booze away, so I better drink it. And I tried. And my 16-year-old daughter, Jana, came home that night, and the look of disgust on her face, I will never, ever forget that look. And she went into the telephone and she called a friend of the family's and she said, please come and help me. My mother is drunk again. And I was so ashamed that I went into the bedroom, into a little jewelry box, and got a handful of reds and took that handful of reds. Not because I wanted to kill myself, but simply because I wanted to run away. I could not deal with those feelings and emotions. I went into that care unit, and they said they could get us sober, but in order to stay sober, we had to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, and we had to work some steps and get a sponsor. I went back to that meeting the next week, and I got myself this little sponsor. And she said that I drank because of fear, anger, and guilt. If I wanted to get the promises of this program, the freedom and the growth and the happiness that this program promises us, I was going to have to work those steps. And she was a stepper. She died about 5 or 6 years ago. And I went down to see her in the hospital. She said, you know, Billie, I can't make any more 12-step calls. And I said, oh, yes, you can. Whenever I go out to share, I'm always going to share the recovery that you gave me. And that's always what I hope to do, is share recovery, because I know that that's why all of us are here. I have a new sponsor today, and she says to me, what step are you living, Billie? I've had these 2 steppers in my life. And Daisy wanted me to work the first step right away. She said that step 1 was the desperate step. Step 1 is the step, the powerless step. It says, I am totally and completely powerless over alcohol, but there is a power within me that can stop, but I can't stop. It's the surrender step, and the step that says, I'm sick and tired of trying. I'm sick and tired of failing. I'm sick and tired of living like an animal. I want to stop the madness. I want to stop the insanity that I'm living in. I don't want to do it anymore. And that my life was unmanageable, the second part of that step, I did not know how unmanageable my life could be until the last year and a half. I have a new my new sponsor says that it's a very easy thing to do, but not a simple thing to do. Or she says it's a simple thing, not an easy thing. Got it mixed up, sorry. She says that all you have to do, Billie, is give up the struggle. Give up the struggle. You know, I really do find out, and what I've found out in the last 18 months is when I allow what comes my way to come and allow what goes to go and realize that life is those pain, joy feelings, and I don't have to get stuck in either one of them, my life works. I wish that I could tell you that that happens all the time, but it doesn't. What I'm trying to do is get some kind of balance in my life. You know, I don't have any balance. I came from real serious in that childhood that was full of chaos and struggle and fights and brawls and all the nightmare that goes on with the disease of alcoholism. Real serious, and I want to lighten up. I want to learn how to laugh. I want to learn how to play. I want to learn how to smell the flowers. You know, I go to the video store, and I head right for the drama section. I'm such a little drama queen. Anyway, I really want to get some balance. And now we come to step 2. And by the way, these are the way the steps work in my life. and that's what I get to share. We all have our own story of how they work in our life. And it's just a good thing that step 2 says, come to believe in a power greater than I am. A power greater than I am? Something that made the sun and the moon and the stars all work in perfect syncrasy? I knew there was something like that. I could not deal with the God thing. I couldn't deal with the God thing because I hated God. I hated God, I hated our judicial system, and I hated the murderer of my 20-year-old son. Because of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, which bottom line teaches love and forgiveness, I've been able to go through a lot of that stuff. It was interesting. About 10 years ago, I decided that I was not going to put all of this negative stuff into my head anymore. I was going to stop listening to this crazy news and reading these newspapers. Well, then a couple of weeks ago, this O.J. Simpson thing came on the television, and I was riveted to it. I mean, I could not take my eyes off of it. And I got to sit there, and I got to experience, what I did is I sat in the murder trial of my son for 13 months, and I went out and got dead drunk every night. It's the only way that I could deal with the death of my child. I put so much energy into my child. And so I sat there during that trial, and I got to feel the feelings of the mother. I got to feel the feelings of the sadness of the whole deal, and I didn't have to go out and get drunk. About 2 weeks into the trial, I was sitting there one day, and I remembered that the mother and the brother of the murderer of my son out in the hallway came up to me and said, "Billie, it was just an accident. He doesn't even remember doing it." But I screamed, "My son is dead." And I had forgotten that all these years later, you see. And what happened was my sponsor told me that hate destroys the hater, that we alcoholics, we cannot afford to harbor resentments and angers. And our book tells us that resentment and anger blocks us from the sunlight of the Spirit, and that I was going to have to forgive the murderer, and I did not know how I was going to do that. Somebody told me that when I was driving around out there in a blackout, I could have killed somebody, but I didn't. And so what happened is I finally decided that maybe the murderer of Bobby was drug-affected or alcoholic. And just deciding that, I could start a forgiveness process. And then all these years later, I get the confirmation that he doesn't even remember doing it, that he probably was drug-affected or alcoholic when he did it. And forgiveness has been a process for me, a process of simply letting go of the fear, making a decision to let go of the pain. The only thing was, the pain seemed to be all I had left of my body. So I wanted to keep it, and I wanted to keep it, but I simply had to make a decision to let go and let go and let go. When I finally got rid of that horrible resentment and anger, it was like the pain, like a knife, was twisting in my heart, and it was twisting and turning and twisting and turning, and that pain went away, and it's never, ever, ever come back again. And I was going to this step study that my sponsor had had agreed with me to go to. And in this step study was a recovery house for women where they'd lost their health and their hope and their kids and their joys and everything. And it was about 9 months after I got sober. And I woke up one morning just crazy. Why have you done this to me, God? What did I do to deserve this terrible thing? It was a Tuesday, and that was the night of my step study. And I knew that if I could get there, I'd be safe. I remember concentrating my foot on the gas pedal to get by the liquor stores, because I also knew if I could just get a drink down in here, it would get rid of that awful, awful pain that was in there. I went by the liquor store, and I went into the meeting, and I sat on the chair, and the tears just poured down my face. And the women in that meeting, you see, death is one of those powerful, powerful feelings. People in our society don't want to talk about death. And yet those ladies were alcoholic women, and they knew my pain, and they could listen, and they could love me. And they could say, Billie, if you just don't drink one day at a time, it's going to get better. It's going to be okay. And I didn't drink, and today I can be grateful for the 20 years that I had with my body instead of in such a terrible, a terrible rage. And how death speaks to me today is to live in the now. Basic principle that AA teaches us, one day at a time. Live in the now. Yesterday is gone and tomorrow is only a dream. And all we have is right now, and it's our time. It's our time right now. And I continued to go to that meeting, and there was a young woman in that meeting, and her name was Cindy. Now, Cindy was not able to stay sober. A lot of people hang around these meetings. They want this deal so bad. Cindy had one of those helpless, hopeless, lost looks on her face, and always had her hand up as a newcomer. And one night I went into the meeting, I said, Cindy, what's happened to you? The lights were on her face. And she said, I don't know, but I haven't smiled in so long, my face hurts. I love telling that story because that's the story of Alcoholics Anonymous. Miracles are transformed lives to me, and that's what Alcoholics Anonymous means. That's what we all are here, sitting here helpless, hopeless drunks with these transformed lives and all these wonderful birthdays we got to see today. Now, I've been telling that story all over. Every time I speak, I tell that story, I tell the story of Cindy. And 2 weeks ago, I was in a meeting in Pasadena where I live, and I looked across the room, and there was Cindy sitting there. And my heart just raced, and I went over to her at the coffee break. I went, hi, Cindy, and she says, I know you. And I said, yes, you know me. And then I said, do you remember about 10 years ago that you said this to me? And she said, I don't remember, but it sounds like something I'd say. And I said, well, how long are you sober now? And she said, I have 7 months. I continue to drink, to smoke pot and take pills, so haven't been clear for 7 months. But she says, I smile a lot now, and probably God stayed with me because you were telling my story all over the place. What a nice story that was. What a great story that was for me. And I kept on, and something was relieving these ladies of their alcoholism. Something was relieving me of my alcoholism. And something was putting their lives back together. Something was getting their joy back together. And I know this lady, and she says, if you want to see the face of God, just look around. I have a different concept of God than that first kind of a God I got, especially after going through what I've gone through this past year. And in Alcoholics Anonymous, both in the 3rd and the 11th step, it says, a God as we understand him, in italics. And Alcoholics Anonymous works very well in Japan and Hindu and Judaism and all kinds of religions. So I'm very happy that I don't have to have that mea culpa, mea culpa, mea culpa, through my fault, through my most grievous fault, God, that I can have a God of love today. And the God that I know today is the bringer, is the creator of all things and the bringer of all truth and goodness and love. And that gets to be my description of my God. And how lucky we are that we can have our very own gods. We don't have to have that. Now I'm down to the 4th step, and I could not work the 4th step because I did not know feelings, and I couldn't do columns. My sponsor gave me a little tablet, and she told me just to write the good stuff and the bad stuff. And I didn't know anything good about me, but she helped me with that. And I wrote, and she told me to turn the page and not look back and write and write. And I wrote and wrote, and finally it was time for me to take it and give it to her, and that would be my 5th step. I was scared and ashamed and embarrassed to tell her all of this stuff about me, but she assured me it was going to be all right. And after I did that, she said, now, do you believe that your higher power, your God, can forgive you? And I said at the time, yes, I believe that. Today, I have a God of love, not a God of judgment. So I don't even need to ask him, because he didn't ever judge me in the first place. So I don't even need to ask him to forgive me. But she says, then you have to forgive yourself. Right now, you have to forgive yourself. And you know, I heard Clancy talk about all the ladies, and I think not only ladies, ladies and men on Main Street who never, ever get sober. They don't get sober because they have to carry that awful guilt all around down in here, and that's what these steps do. They bring us up and out, and they let us walk in the sunlight so we don't have to carry all of that awful, awful guilt around. And I find out that the more I forgive myself, the more I can love myself. And when we come to the 6th and the 7th step, those steps are about humility. And it says the first move towards humility is recognizing my character defects. Humility to me is letting God be in charge of everything, or letting my higher power get the credit and be in charge of everything. These character defects that are my character defects are anything that harms me or my fellow man are my character defects. And humbly ask Him to remove any of those character defects that stand in the way of my usefulness to my higher power and my fellow man. My sponsor says more will be revealed, that's the truth, and more will be required. You see, I cannot do the same things that I could do 5 years ago and live comfortable with this peace and this balance. I cannot do those same things and get away with them. And so more is changing. Now we're down on the 8th step, and the 8th step is a step that said I made a list of all the amends I need to make. That's the first time I started taking responsibility for Billie. Now I could just lay you out on the floor with the story of me and my 5 kids and my drunk husband, and I mean I could go on and on and on and on with my story and make you feel so sorry for me, because it was never my fault. It was, if only Jim or Joe or John or whatever his name is had come back and make Billie happy. If only I had a better job, and if only I were younger, and if only I were prettier, and if only I'd win the lottery, and on and on and on and on it goes. And when I started making a list of the people that I needed to make amends for, and I started looking at what my part was, is the first time I started taking responsibility. And bottom line, Alcoholics Anonymous teaches that we be responsible. I'm responsible physically, mentally, and spiritually. I'm responsible for me. The 9th step is the step where we actually make the amends. I told you a little bit about my husband, Bob. So many memories with you here, Jerry. Bob and I had a passing in the night relationship. You see, I have 100 friends all over the place, but if anybody starts getting close to me, I get real scared and I do something to get them away. Now that's when I came here. Alcoholics Anonymous has changed all that. I have a wonderful relationship with Billie, a wonderful relationship with my children and all of the people in my life. I have wonderful, clear relationships with them, and I'm grateful to Alcoholics Anonymous for that. But it was not like that in those days. And neither one of us knew how to have this relationship. My husband did not drink again, but he continued to write his own prescriptions. And that morning he was going on the table for an angioplasty. And that morning he medicated himself. And I'm sure, because there were I didn't even look at that until after he died, a long time, because we live in such denial, and I live in such ya-ya land. Pollyanna, that's yeah, it's going to get better. Yeah, it's going to get better. It doesn't even happen, see? And so that morning, he went to the hospital, they medicated him, they put the tubes down, pulled the tubes out, and his heart stopped and it wouldn't start again. I went with his children down to the funeral home to arrange for the funeral, and then I went home, and my new sponsor has me writing different 4th steps these days. I took her out for her birthday the other day, and I was I was telling her all this stuff going on with me. She takes the plate and the silverware off this plain white placemat and draws columns. I feel, because my underlying fear, my responsibility, my thinking about it, what can I do about it today? Sometimes she has to help me fill out those blanks because the feelings are so powerful I can't even get into them. She says it's fourth step work, and she says what that does clears up my thinking and gets rid of my fear. It truly does do those things. But so she had me writing this fourth step on all the men in my life and what my part was, which I never wanted to look at. And I had written this and shoved it under my bed while I went home from this funeral home. And I pulled out this inventory and I wrote a long amends letter to my husband, Bob. And I got up early the next morning and I drove down. My son Danny drove me down to the cemetery. And I went into the room where his casket was, and I pulled up a chair next to the casket, and I read to him how sorry I was that I wasn't the mate that I wanted him to be. How sorry I was that I worked all the time. I worked all the time. My job was more important than he was, and than this relationship. How sorry I was that we both wanted to have this intimate, close, best friend relationship. We both wanted to be loved, and we didn't know how to do it. You know, what happened is I used to work like 10 hours a day. I would come home and I would be so grouchy and crabby and nasty. And I would be grouching and crabbing at him, and the telephone would ring. I'd go, "Oh, hello, how are you?" To a perfect stranger. I would be nicer to a perfect stranger than I was to the husband that I wanted to have this best friend close relationship with. And how sorry I was we would never ever get that chance again. And I folded up that paper and I put it there over his heart, and I left it there. And you see, Alcoholics Anonymous gave me freedom once more. That's what these steps do for us. They free us. And I got free. The next amend that I have to talk about is always difficult. It was about my daughter Cindy. Cindy was hit by a car when she was 17 years old in Portland, Oregon. Bilateral cerebral contusion, brainstem damage, fractured femur. Brought home by United Airlines into Intercommunity Hospital in coma for 2 months. Doctor said she would be a vegetable, Dr. Rogers. One day, after a couple of months, she woke up. And we had to teach her how to walk. She had no memories of the past. She didn't know how to walk or how to do anything about movies. She didn't know anything. We had to teach her everything. Today, Cindy is 7 years clean and sober. She's married. She has 2 children. She's dyslexic and she has some residual brain damage. But if you met her, you wouldn't know it. When Cindy was about 4 years sober, she was writing her 4th step. And she couldn't really write it, so she did a lot of it orally with her sponsor. And one day the phone rang. She goes, "Mom, I need to talk to you." What came out in my 4th step is, I don't have a lot of memories, but what came out is a lot of feelings that you never loved me, that you never acknowledged me, that you used to slap me down the stairs and knock me around, that you never loved me. And what did I do to you to make you not ever love me? Why don't you love me? And I took a deep breath. And I know that only my higher power could have given me the courage to tell Cindy the truth. And I said, "It's the truth, Cindy. I never wanted you. I always resented you. I was mean to you. You were my 4th child, and I was 20 years old, and I was 8 months pregnant with you, and my husband left me. And, I was uneducated. I had these 4 little babies, and I didn't know what to do, and another baby that was coming was just too much for me. You were like another rock around my neck, and I carried that with me. And the only thing that I can tell you, Cindy, is that I love you with my whole heart now, and I'm so, so sorry." Cindy hung up the phone. I don't know what time went by. I called my sponsor. My sponsor said that I validated her pain by telling her the truth. Maybe I lost my daughter, but that I I gave her her freedom. Some time went by and she called me up and said she needed to come and talk to me, and she took me in the bathroom and she said, "You know, Mom, you made your 9th step by telling me the truth. And I want to make my 9th step by telling you what a rotten little kid I was. I egged you on a lot and I was a rotten little kid to you. But the best thing," she said, "I want you to know is I don't have to try to get you love anymore. I know that you love me." We were in Lake Tahoe and Cindy was in the front row 2 weeks ago and the tears were just poured down her face. Because you see, because of this program, I got to receive Cindy's forgiveness. And I get to be a loving mother, and Cindy gets to be a loving daughter. During my sickness, she lives an hour and a half away from me. She came every week and cleaned my house, and she called me every single day. And one day at the end of a meeting when we were all holding hands saying, "Our Father, and forgive me my trespasses as I forgive those who trespass against me." You see, forgiveness had come full cycle in my life, and I wondered, had I not forgiven the murderer of my son, would I be able to receive Cindy's forgiveness? I really think not. We're down to step 10 now. If you want to do yourself a real favor, get your big book out, and in the step section there are all these little promises that go in the step section. I've underlined all of mine. And it says, by the time we get down to step 10 and we've worked all those steps to the best of our ability, and now we will become God conscious, and His Spirit will begin to flow through us, and we will intuitively know how to act and what to do. I know that those promises have come true for very, very many of us. Step 10 is the step that keeps me current. It's the step that tells me make direct amends. It's the step that tells me I don't have to be perfect anymore. God, I grew up and thought I had to be perfect and beat myself up most of my life for not being perfect. And it says I don't have to be perfect anymore. And step 11 is the step that says just pause. Pause and listen for that voice. It says, I gotta stop. Totally stop and listen. Listen for that voice. During my sickness, in my first 6 months of my sickness, I had 103 fevers and I was so sick and I was so alone. Sometimes I would have to ask this higher power just to wrap His Spirit around me to allow me to sleep. I couldn't sleep. And I was scared and I was sick and I was alone. And sometimes I would look down at the end of my bed and it seemed like there was a presence. A presence was there that was protecting me and keeping me safe and watching over me. And what I found is a higher power that's so intimate and so fine and always meets me when I ask Him, always walks before me. And step 12 is a step that says, I wonder where all the people are that I got sober with 15 years ago. Some are here, but so many of them are gone. I don't know where they are. My sponsor says that I'll never ever get bored with meetings if I come to meetings to give and not to get. And that's what I always try to do. I come to every meeting I come to, I try to come and give. A lot of times I want to hang out with my buddies, but I go to the back of the room and find somebody sitting alone and sit down and try to talk to them. Sometimes they're newcomers, sometimes they're old-timers. But I always try to go to a meeting to give and not to get. A little bit about my children. My son Danny, a heroin addict he was for 15 years, bad heroin. I bailed him out of jail. He was my only son left. And I bailed him out of jail and I bought him attorneys and I gave him my Versatile card and I tried everything to fix him. He was in the jail for 6 months and he wasn't even out for a year for all these felonies. He wasn't even out for 6 months and he had 6 felony counts against him. And he called me, Mom, you got to help me. This time I'm going to San Quentin. only this time I had spent a year in Al-Anon. And Al-Anon taught me how to stop enabling my children to death. Al-Anon taught me to say, okay, God, he's your kid and he's my kid. You love him and I love him, but I cannot fix him and I cannot take care of him. You see, I grew up with the idea that I got all the values and all the good stuff when I took care of my drunk father and my sick mother and all my little sisters. So I thought it was my job to save the world and fix the world. And I come here and I find out the world doesn't want to be saved or fixed. They just want to be loved and appreciated is all. Anyway, what happened is he didn't go to San Quentin. He went to Crossroads in Eureka, California. He stayed there for 9 months. He came home. No program, no steps, none of that, no continuing anything. And we all know we don't have a drinking or a using problem. We have a living problem. And so it wasn't long before he had the needle back in his arm, not only his, but his wife's arm. And but the deal is, once you get the freedom, how it is to be free, you know, it's real hard to go back out there and be a drunk again. And so what happened is he and his wife got in the car and they went up to Bullhead City in 8 days. They cold turkey kicked this heroin. They got back in the car and they came right by the house to the connection, That's how cunning and powerful and baffling this disease is. It wasn't long, though, they got back in the car and they went back up to Bullhead City again, and this time they found a little Alano club, and Danny found old Joe, sober 35 years out of the swamps of Alabama, and old Joe made him write his 4th step when he was 23 days clean. There was not any NA in Bullhead City in those days, 7 years ago, and old Joe didn't say, I don't want to hear about your drugs. He carried him to meetings and he loved him and he listened to him. And Danny and 2 other people started NA there in Bullhead City. And this past June, they went back and forth to Las Vegas and called World Service, so they did it right and started an NA meeting. And this last June in Laughlin, across from Bullhead City, they had a convention with 650 people starting from that meeting that he started. And Danny spoke at that meeting. And I sat in the front row and the tears poured down my face because I'd driven him morning and morning after morning after morning to get his methadone. And he shared about having to go back to the very murderer of his brother. He was so addicted to heroin. He needed his fix so, so bad. And now he's clean. And I have 2 other children, and I have 3 children and their mates that are clean and sober in Narcotics Anonymous. And there's just no kind of a joy like that. My daughter Gloria is 9 years clean, and she went through the house, that Stepping Stones house that I first went to. And we don't have to live in all that chaos and struggle and all those fights and brawls and all that stuff. Danny is a general contractor now, and last November he was doing a job down here in LA, and he brought his men over to my house. I have this little 1926 house, and he completely put new walls, new air conditioning, new plumbing, new all kinds of stuff in this house and fixed it up, and landscaped it, put $30,000 into it, and it's just darling. And it's my little enchanted cottage. And I said, well, why are you doing all this? He says, it's my amends to you, Mom. If I could count the money that you gave me, it would be at least $30,000. It's really my amends to you. So I'm just, I'm really blessed to have this life. I am still sick, not as sick as I used to be. I get like 3 weeks and I'm great, and then I have a couple of days. But I want to tell you that I'm real rich and happy. I have enough money to pay all my bills, and I have so many wonderful, wonderful, wonderful friends in my life. I learned a lot of things in my sickness about receiving. You see, I've always been a giver. When I'm a giver, I can feel big and powerful and important, and I can control the world when I'm a giver. But to be a receiver is a different deal, a whole different deal. And when I was so sick and I would go to the store and have to leave my groceries in the store, I had to ask people to do my grocery shopping, to cook my clothes, to wash my clothes, to cook my food, to wash my clothes. All of those basic, fundamental things drive me to meetings. I had to ask. And I found out that in order to be a receiver, First of all, I have to ask. And second of all, I have to have enough humility and enough self-esteem to know that I'm worth getting it. The reason I couldn't receive anything most of the time is because I didn't feel like I was worth receiving it. And what I find out is you can't have anything unless I'm able to receive it. You see, I can't have my health, I can't have a job, I can't have a relationship, I can't have anything, nothing in my life, unless I'm able to receive it. I went to a woman-to-woman in April, and there was a workshop. And the workshop was titled The Grace and the Gift of Sobriety. And I raised my hand, and I raised my hand, and nobody called on me. And I kept raising my hand because I wanted to ask the perplexing question that I've had since I got sober. Why? Why did I get the gift and the grace of sobriety? And my father die, and my husband's die, and all of the people, my child die, and everybody that I know have to die. Aunts and uncles, and I mean, in my family, everybody's a drunk. And most of them are dying. And why did I get this gift? And I want to ask that question. I've asked it all over the place. Well, they didn't call on me. So I left the meeting, and I went down to the lunchroom, and I sat down to a young woman who had 10 months of sobriety. And of course, I asked her the question, never expecting an answer. She says, "Oh, Billie, it's a very simple thing. You simply bent down and picked up the gift of sobriety." And gosh, I hope all of the newcomers here will bend down and pick up the gift of sobriety. It is a wonderful, wonderful gift. I think that love is the most powerful force in the universe, and that we in Alcoholics Anonymous, we have that gift of that love here. You know, what can we give back? Our gift is everybody wants to give their gift back to the world, and we have this gift that we can give back. And I learned about love here in Alcoholics Anonymous. What I learned about love is that it's a great welling up of understanding, a great welling up of gratitude, of compassion, of warmth, of affection. It's the togetherness and the belongingness that we get to have in rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. I'm very, very grateful to be a recovering alcoholic, recovering in Alcoholics Anonymous with all of you tonight. Thank you.
Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst, then one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected. even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has been established, it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, oop, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. I don't know if that shows up. The gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.